Welcome to BuzzLine, the weekly show about Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets athletics. I'm John Rawl, the publisher of GoJackets.com. Jonathan Leifheit is beside me, and despite losing to the Georgia Bulldogs this past weekend at Bobby Dodd Stadium, we must start the show with the most important words in all of broadcasting. What is the good word?
Well, to hell with Georgia.
Right.
I don't care if we lose to them, we beat them, we tie them. We don't play them. It's still the appropriate thing to say.
And that is what Georgia Tech, that is the battle cry, and that will forever be the battle cry at Georgia Tech. We're going to talk about the loss to Georgia and the end of the 2017 season. Jonathan, this has been a season that I guess you could go back to game one and see that the Jackets in some ways were snake bit in 2017.
Yeah, I mean, if we reflect back on it, there were several games, that basically hinged on a single play. I mean, it started with the opening of the season with Tennessee and about 3 or 4 different plays that if you could have flipped the outcome of that, Georgia Tech would have won. You go to Miami, got the same kind of deal. Virginia is probably another one that is that way. It just seems like no matter how it goes, Tech found a way to not make the play to win the game. And then on Saturday, not only did they not make the play to win the game, they didn't make really any plays to win the game at all. And to Georgia's credit, they did, and they pretty much kicked the snot out of Georgia Tech once again at Bobby Dodd Stadium. And I will also note my extreme disappointment with some of my fellow fans. The amount of red there was a bit disgraceful.
Yeah. We'll talk about it. Georgia wins 38-7. We'll be back to look at all of it right here on BuzzLine. Small request, if you can, don't grab your drink and take a swig until about 2 seconds after you know we're done, because that's showing up on the show. And I don't want people thinking you're a raging alcoholic. And welcome back to BuzzLine from Buffalo's Cafe coming. And this is the show all about Georgia Tech sports with Jonathan Leifheit of GoJackets.com. I'm John Rawl. And here at Buffalo's Cafe, you'll find 27 televisions. Truly not a bad spot in the house to watch any of your favorite sporting events or whatever you might want to watch. Maybe they have soap operas in here during the lunch hour. I'm not sure. Maybe, Jonathan, you've got a favorite soap?
Dove.
Okay. Wise guy here. But it is a truly great environment here at Buffalo's Cafe. We're just off of Highway 400, and this is exit 14 off of Georgia 400. You can find us here at Buffalo's Cafe, coming a Georgia Tech-friendly place, Buffalo's Cafe. Georgia Tech loses big time to Georgia. The number 7 Georgia Bulldogs come back to Athens, a place they had not lost in the 21st century. It's been 1999 since Georgia Tech last beat Georgia. And the Dogs win 38-7 over the Jackets. And Jonathan, in a season of real head scratchers and bad play, would you say this game was the worst of all of them?
No, actually, I would not. I
would
actually say that the biggest head scratcher was last weekend
against Duke.
I mean, Duke wins by 23. Let's face it, Georgia's a much better team. They win by 31, but Tech had no business losing to Duke by 23. They played horrifically. It was about as bad. I think that outing against Duke was probably the worst of the year. The outing against Georgia might have been third or second worst of the year. Depends on how you look at it. I thought UVA was pretty bad as well.
All right. Well, to Duke's credit, they did go on the road this past weekend and defeat Wake Forest and become bowl eligible.
Yep, they did.
Does that make you feel any better?
No.
Okay.
Not at all. What that means is that had we beat them, they'd have been deflated and out of it, and we should have beaten them and should have played a heck of a lot better.
And a game Georgia Tech needed to win.
Yeah, and that's just it. When you start looking at the season, they had games coming down the stretch. They needed to win against UVA because they had some tough games coming, and they didn't win.
Yeah.
Then they did find a way to win against Virginia Tech. And then to follow that up and clinch their bowl eligibility, all they needed to do was to beat a struggling Duke team, a team that had lost 6 straight. And then they came back out there and just laid an egg. And then follow that up with really kind of a tepid, weak effort against Georgia. Granted, Georgia is a pretty darn good team, but they, it was still a pretty bad effort.
It was a really bad day. Nothing went the Jackets' way, it seemed. They did get one touchdown. Any comment about that touchdown drive there?
Well, I mean, they actually managed to get a few minor drives going, but, that was the only one they were able to pull off. They really spent the whole day kind of battling field position, never really got a good area on the field where they could start with. It was always deep in their own territory. It's hard to put a drive together against a really good defense like Georgia and be able to sustain that drive. You really have no room for error when you play a team like that. And really they were only able to do that once. But most of the day they did not have any short fields. It was always drive the length of the field, and they just couldn't do that.
Well, Georgia Tech, in a season of bad play and real question marks for this team, it would have been a tough challenge to defeat Georgia at home. Let's face it, Georgia is a team on a mission. They are right there. The national championship was within their grasp, as well as some other teams that Georgia Tech hates. Alabama probably will have a chance. Auburn will have a chance. Clemson will have a chance.
Miami.
Yeah, these are all Georgia Tech rivals. And certainly if they're not rivals on the field, they're rivals in the workplace. I mean, you can't go anywhere in Metro Atlanta and not see Auburn and Alabama and all these other schools. And so it just makes Georgia Tech's mission even harder when these other schools are just that darn good.
I agree. And, kind of watching what's happened this season, I mean, Tech was so close, but then it just seemed like right when once things went against them, we saw this in 2014 where when the things went for them, it snowballed in their favor. This year when things went against them, it snowballed in the opposite direction. Never could really get it together. Lost 4 of the last 5 games. And, that tells you how close they were to bowl eligible. And they had 2 very winnable games in UVA and Duke.
Well, in game 1, people were talking to Quan Marshall, where did this guy come from? Jonathan kind of had the inside scoop that he would be the starting quarterback. His numbers were amazing in that Tennessee loss. Did he have another game quite like that the rest of the year?
Not really. He played reasonably well against some of the opponents, but in terms of production, I think that was in terms of yardage and points. I'd have to go back and look at the schedule, but I believe that that was probably about as good as it got, and actually it was. Granted, it took 2 overtimes. They had 28 points in regulation, which they did better against some other teams. But 41 points was the highest output of the season, even with realizing it took double overtime to get that. So they had about 650 yards of offense. Mm-hmm. Never came close to that against anybody else. So that was more or less, from an offensive standpoint, one of the highlights of the season.
Well, yeah, the season, the high water mark, you could say, was that Tennessee game, maybe late third quarter, early fourth, when the Jackets had their hand on their neck and were ready to drown Tennessee, or the Tennessee Vols, or as my son, you were kind enough to let sit in here last week. He says, who are the Tennessee Vultures? And they kind of are vultures.
They're vultures without a head coach.
That's right. They didn't step on their throat when they should have, and they came back, and the way that game turned out was kind of a harbinger of what was to happen in 2017.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, it was the Jackets came out strong and then just could not finish the deal, and we saw that numerous times. Miami was the next instance of that. We then saw that against we saw that against UVA, had a lead late. We finally got over the cusp on Virginia Tech. That was probably really the only close one that they won all year long.
Was that the best win?
That was, I'd say that was probably the best win of the year was beating Virginia Tech. I mean, they were number 17 at the time, and I think they finished 9-3. So by far the best win of the year.
Well, it was a difficult season for all, and we would hope that the Jackets could somehow pull that win out against Georgia and get bowl eligible. And that just was not the case. And I guess most Jacket fans are ready to forget about 2017 as fast as possible.
Yep, and just for those who weren't aware, there was a possibility for a bowl kind of headed into the weekend, but it kind of depended on the number of teams that won. There are 78 bowl slots, and they would have needed 78 teams that were 6-6 and better. And as a result, they ended up with 78 teams that had a 6-6 record. So Tech has no chance to even apply for a waiver. no chance at a bowl. So this season is done.
And some of the players we saw, the Austin, he got on Twitter, thanked everybody.
Yep.
And I know probably other ones. That's just the one I saw. Class move there. Hey, you dream of bowls, you dream of championships, but realistically, most teams don't enjoy that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah, a lot of them don't. And, we've been fortunate at Tech that it's been a pretty good run in terms of that. But, two of the last 3 years have been bad, but if you go back, 2 of the last 4 years have also been very good. So
yeah, we're going to talk about that because some fans out there really are pretty disgusted with the way the season worked out, and is there any smoke to that fire? So we'll talk about it when we come back here on BuzzLine from Buffalo's Cafe incoming. And welcome back to Buffalo's Cafe. This is BuzzLine, the all-jacket show where Buzz is front and center each and every week. I'm John Raw with Jonathan Leifheit of GoJackets.com. Georgia Tech falls to the number 7 Georgia Bulldogs in a big way, 38-7, a game that was pretty much over with in the second half, pretty early on in the second half it seemed. And Jacket fans were rushing to the car and ready to start 2018 as fast as possible. But unfortunately, you have to wait. This, as Jonathan mentioned going into the break, this is the second losing season in 3 years. It's the another bad season. Of course, Georgia Tech had a pretty good season in 2016, and they had a good season in 2014. So I guess some of the fans want to know, as good as last year was, well, this was a bad year. So is that acceptable? Is it acceptable?
No, this year, this type of season is not acceptable. And so the question becomes, what do you do? And I think when we listen to the audio from Coach Johnson,
which is coming up,
we'll hear that I think everything's on the table. And I believe, he's, if I'm an assistant coach, I think every one of them are up for evaluation and to see what they can do. There's also the notion of how much resources are we putting into this. I think I saw an article a few weeks ago that kind of ranked what the spend was on football, and out of the 14 ACC teams, where do you think Georgia Tech ranked?
4th.
13th.
Okay.
So, and it was somewhere on the order of $17 million. And then you start climbing up to where, Virginia Tech was in the 30-something odd million. They were spending roughly twice what Tech is spending. You look at Clemson, and they were,
Venables is making more than Johnson, right?
No, Venables does not make. Johnson makes close to $3 million a year. Venables is in the $1 to $1.5 million range. Now Dabo certainly makes more, but
okay,
God knows he deserves it.
He does, and I hate to say that.
Yeah,
the guy actually came to my wedding 20 years ago, and little did I know he'd end up being the Clemson coach. And
you'll have to tell me this sometime.
It was one of my ex-wives. She was from Tuscaloosa. Her childhood friend was Dabo's wife.
Ah,
so Kathleen's her name. Nice lady. But I never knew that she'd end up in Tigertown, and Dabo would end up in Tigertown. I'm not a Clemson person, so it really bothers me that I had a chance to take Dabo out when he was actually, I can't remember if he was selling. I think he was an insurance salesman.
Selling insurance at some point.
I knew him at that time. It was 1997 was my first ex-Odyssey. Hopefully you haven't had any ex-Odysseys.
No, none that I actually married anyway.
Yeah. But anyway, yes. So Dabo Sweeney, insurance agent to the stars of Tuscaloosa at least. But anyway, the people want better. We're getting comments on our Facebook page. Players deserve better. Paul needs to go. Fire Paul, not Roof.
I mean, folks can do that, but you know what? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and expecting different results.
Well, let me first throw out there though, in college football, not Georgia Tech, but just the whole landscape of college football, he would have already been fired at most schools.
Well, no, I wouldn't say most, but a lot.
Most Power 5 schools.
The upper half of the Power 5, a lot of them.
I know Georgia
with
Tech's
this record. With this record.
Yeah.
But he also would have had different resources. He would have had a different budget, that type of thing as well. He might have been successful. What I'm saying is, if you're gonna consider a change, then you better be prepared to whip out your pocketbook and give some money, because the next guy that comes in here, if he's going to have the same challenges that Johnson does. I don't think this
Remind people, in case they aren't up to speed on Georgia Tech, What are the challenges?
Well, the challenges are you've got an academics, you've got a limited curriculum, so you can get exceptions to that to get kids in, but you still have a limited curriculum that you're recruiting against. So you have a much narrower set.
Even if you're a smart kid.
Even if you're a smart kid, if you don't want to be some kind of a technical engineering, there's not a lot of options. And if you wanted to, there's plenty of types of majors. If you're looking for a cake major to get through school, well, guess what? That ain't going to happen. So even if you're a smart kid, you gotta want to be at Tech to be there. So that's that option. Second one is, as I mentioned, we're spending 13th out of 14 teams in the ACC. You got to give somebody a bigger budget than that.
Who's last? Duke?
Wake Forest. So even Duke is outspending us.
That says something.
Right. So if folks aren't prepared to pony up some money and change things around, and I think Stansberry is working on that. He's just arrived, not too long ago, our athletic director. If folks aren't prepared to pony up and make this thing happen, I don't care who you hire, same thing's going to happen again. We saw it with Gailey. Every coach we've had, pretty much since Bobby Dodd left, has had a similar track record. Our winning percentage has generally been in the 55 to 60% range for every coach we've had that wasn't Bill Lewis. And he was a horrible mistake.
Okay.
So, you just look at it. That's the facts. So, sure. All right, fine. Fire Paul Johnson. If you want to do that, fine. Pony up the money. But the next guy's going to come in, and the same thing's going to happen again and again and again until we get this resource issue
All right,
squared away.
Let's ask that question. Okay, so Georgia Tech needs a lot of money to make, even if they wanted to. I'm not saying they're going to make a change. They probably won't. But if they wanted to make a change, do they currently have that kind of money?
No.
And the only way they can get it is through fundraising?
Fundraising. We've got to, donors have got to step up. And that doesn't mean, and a lot of people are sitting around and waiting for, Oregon has Phil Knight. Oklahoma State's got T. Boone Pickens. God knows there's every school. Who was the nutty banker that was bankrolling Auburn for a while? I can't think of him. At Colonial Bank.
Yeah, good memory.
Paul Bryant Jr. at Alabama. There's big money guys. Carl Smith gave like $25 million to UVA to get them kind of up to snuff a little bit, something like that. There's guys everywhere that have been given that money. Well, guess what? I don't know that there is a single. There's plenty of rich guys that Tech, but I don't know that there's any multi-billionaires that can just fork out money to make that happen. We all have to make it happen. Okay. And it can't just rely. You can't wait for somebody else to do it. You need to make it happen. So if you want to change, make a change in what you're doing as well.
Operators are standing by. Call.
Hey, this week, Georgia Tech is running a Swarm Week AT Fund donation.
Which
thing.
Was on the field Saturday.
Exactly. Go donate. If you got an opinion about who the coach should be, make a donation and tell Stansberry about it. But don't just sit around on the internet screaming fire so-and-so because it does no good. We got to make a change in what we're doing and how we're funding it and the resources we provide our coaches in order to win.
Would Paul Johnson be getting this kind of flack? Not that it's that much to start with, but would he be getting it if he ran a different type of offense?
Yeah. We saw this with, Gailey ran a pro-style offense, and, he had slightly worse results, but they weren't that much worse, but they were worse. Okay. He did not have the highs that Johnson did, but he also didn't have the lows. His was pretty steady. Pretty much 7 wins. You could count on that, but not much more. So he ran a pro-style offense. Same thing. After 7 years, folks were tired of him. They were ready for him to go. And you go back. You look at O'Leary. O'Leary was here just long enough to kind of gain some popularity, and then he left right at the right moment. But it would have regressed to the mean, and that's where we were at. And Bobby Ross had one great year, but otherwise he had that same thing.
He followed a 1990 championship season with a
8-5 record.
8-5 record.
So
probably had people wanting him fired that year.
So if you want something different, then help be the agent to make it different.
The words of Jonathan Leifheit. We'll come back. We'll hear from Coach Paul Johnson post-game after the loss to Georgia. Also, a few of the players we were able to catch up to. And we'll talk about personnel. Signing day, the early signing period is coming up within a month. We'll talk about that and more, plus some basketball talk. All of that ahead as we roll on from Buffalo's Cafe and Coming. This is BuzzLine.
Believes this is okay and that he thinks that this is the type of season that is acceptable, I think you've got the complete wrong impression of who Paul Johnson is. So, can he turn it around? That remains to be seen, but I don't think he's very pleased with where we're at either.
Is Paul Johnson the kind of coach that throws his hands up and walks away?
Probably not, but at some point he may decide he can't do it, and he would walk away at that point. But right now, I don't think he's at that point.
Okay. Well, here's the head coach talking after the loss to Georgia in the locker room.
Kind of late defense, and they haven't really performed well here. Kind of what are your thoughts?
I think like any season, when you finish, you have to take a long, hard look at everything. You have to go back and look at everything, no question. Especially when we have a disappointing season like this. This was disappointing to me. This season we had a chance. Woulda, shoulda, coulda. Can't play that game, but we had a chance for this to be a much better year than it turned out.
And that was Georgia Tech head football coach Paul Johnson after the loss to Georgia. Jonathan, anything you want to add to what his comments were there?
Well, he's right. I mean, the woulda, shoulda, coulda, and he knows that. And I think his comments, and based on also feedback we get, from various and sundry people at the AA and donors and whatnot, I think things are going to be looked at, and I think they're going to look at the resources. I know Todd Stansberry has probably going to look hard at are we doing what we need to do. I talked about ponying up for the resources. Well, are we giving Coach Johnson the proper amount of resources for him to be able to compete and go through that? So I think that's going to be a big thing, and I hope that what Coach Johnson says is, look, I need to make the following changes, and it's going to take this, and hopefully what they'll say is all right, we'll come up with the money, or somebody will provide the money.
Okay. Well, let's go back to 2 years ago, which was another bad year. 3 wins, I think, on that season.
3-9.
What differences happened going from that season to 2015?
Well, that season was kind of an anomaly in the amount of injuries. So that was a team that was decimated from start to finish by injuries. I think at some point, there was a point where we were out there starting 2 true freshman A-backs on that, out on the field. Taquan Marshall, who's now the quarterback that they would have liked to have redshirted, was one of them at one point. So that tells you kind of what they were pressed into. Had some injuries on defense as well, but it was just racked with injuries. This year, had a few, but nothing unusual. So, I mean, it was a slightly better year than the 2015, but not that much better, and certainly not at the level that we all want and expect.
No major coaching changes at the end of 2015?
There were not, no, at that point. So, I mean, I don't think there's been any staff changes really of significance in several years. But I have no inside information on this, but it would not surprise me if there are some changes this year. And, I don't know who or what it would be, but I think it'll probably come out as a result of evaluation from this in terms of where it comes from.
Who is the person within the football staff that is the most gung-ho as we're getting serenaded with Go Dogs here in the restaurant, of course?
Well, if they want to do that, they can do that, but they can kiss my tush. So
That's right. Kiss my grits.
Yep.
Who is the most aggressive recruiter on the staff?
Probably, if I had to make a guess, it would probably be Andy McCollum would be one of them. Lamar Owens does a pretty good job as well, pulling kids, particularly out of kind of that Florida area. Okay. We get good bit. Those would be 2 of the ones that I would probably put near the top in terms of recruiting.
Okay. Well, that some people want to know, are the Jackets getting the kind of players?
Well, no, they need to get better players, particularly on defense. I felt like this past year they did a better job of that in terms of getting players, and we saw some of that because, as an example, Bruce Jordan-Swilling played a good bit as a true freshman, and some of the guys started showing up, in the two deep. Didn't necessarily play because they wanted to try and redshirt them, but they've got to get better on the defensive side and probably on the offensive line side as well. I think we're having to wait too long to get production out of some of the kids. In some cases, right now, the offensive line has really kind of been a struggle this year. Particularly the two tackles have not played well. Now, granted, Jahazel Lee, they also lost Andrew Marshall to injury, but that's just one. They've had Bailey Ivermeyer out there, who's a walk-on. He's a great kid, but he's not going to do well in pass protection against a five-star defensive end from Georgia or Clemson or anybody else, and he hasn't. For that matter, Jahazel Lee hasn't done that great either. So they've got to do better on the lines, defensive line, offensive line, and I think they need to grab just a couple more playmakers, and that'll be the difference. I think by and large the skill players are pretty solid, one or two short of what they need, but the line play has just been atrocious on both sides of the ball.
All right, before we go to our next break, we're going to go hear from some of the players that Rod McKenzie of GoJackets.com was able to catch up with, one of those being Taquan Marshall, quarterback for the Jackets. Is his job firmly in place for 2018? Well,
I mean, probably, but there's also a part of me that says I hope not, because I'd like to see somebody push him. Matthew Jordan, who's been the backup, he actually, by the way, elected to go ahead and graduate. He's been just suffered with injuries this year, and I think he's to the point he's already graduated, so he elected not to come back. So that's an extra scholarship. But Lucas Johnson is a redshirt freshman quarterback, and Jay Jones. I'd love to see us go into spring with particularly, I think, Johnson, who's been the backup. I'd love to see him try and push Taquan as much as possible.
All right. Well, let's hear from Mr. Marshall now, along with Nathan Cottrell, talking after the loss to Georgia.
I mean, they were flying around, as you can see. Their ends are really long. We were trying to get around them, just try to get some things going on the perimeter. I mean, we just didn't really execute as well as we would like to in the second half.
This is probably one of you for the second game in a row. The third quarter has been a struggle offensively for you guys. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I mean, I couldn't really tell you. It's just a funk, maybe. I don't know.
Nate, you kind of wanted a few big plays of the day. You kind of talked about your long run and kind of set those out pretty well.
I mean, we knew we were going to get some opportunities on the perimeter. So when we did, just try to make the most of it, try to make a big play and help the team out.
Nick, can you describe the challenges in trying to get those guys on the ground when you're trying to block the perimeter?
I mean, they were coming down hard. They were playing low, so it was hard to kind of get leverage on them. But once we realized what they were doing, we were really just trying to block them out because they were just trying to force it. But we were able to get it around them a few times. But they're good defense. I mean, it's hard to get around the perimeter when they're flying just everywhere. So.
Juan, could you run us through the TD pass to Ricky, and were you surprised that he was as wide open as he was?
We called a rub route to the inside guy. And first pre-snap, I was thinking to myself, oh, this might be a little challenge. But then when it came off and Brad came inside, it kind of shocked me at how open he was. I thought I was going to have to put a little touch on it and have Ricky make a play. But when I saw he was wide open, I just tried to make an easy throw, and he made a play.
All right, that was Georgia Tech quarterback there, Taquan Marshall, and his offensive mate, Nathan Cottrell, talking after the loss to Georgia this past weekend. Anything you want to say about Cottrell?
Cottrell had probably, in my opinion, the highlight of the game, which were few and far between, I'll say. He had a 33-yard run off a pitch, and that was probably I've been waiting for him to kind of get a little more decisive and move up the field with a little more kind of authority and I guess just looking for more decisiveness in what he does. And he did that on that play, made a nice cut behind a block that Kervonte Benson threw, and did a good job. So hopefully that's signs of things for him to come. He's been a little tentative and likes to dance a little bit, sometimes takes the wrong angle around the blocks. But that play he did pretty well. I thought, looks like maybe he's starting to get there, and he's got great speed. So, hopefully that's a sign of things to come for him. But that's all I really need to say about him.
All right, well, what is the sign of things to come for you, Georgia Tech fans, as Georgia Tech must put this year behind them and move on to next year? We'll tell you when we come back. Also get a recruiting blast from Mr. Leifheit, and we'll talk some basketball before we get out of here for the week. We're at Buffalo's Cafe and Coming. This is BuzzLine. To hell with Georgia. This is BuzzLine, and we're at Buffalo's, where everyone is family. And right here at Buffalo's Cafe in Cumming, you'll find an incredible wait staff. They'll take care of you. You'll get great food. I had a special burger made for me that you can request when you come in. You can do things the way you want them done. You love that Carolina Fire barbecue sauce.
I do. That's good stuff.
I had that put on my burger, and it was awesome. And the fries are wonderful as well. And, of course, they got all the chicken selections. They've got both chicken tenders as well as wings. It's all right here at Buffalo's Cafe. They've got 14 Metro Atlanta locations. We're just happening to be at the one in Cumming, but go to any of them and tell them we sent you here at BuzzLine. John Rawl with Jonathan Leifheit of GoJackets.com talking Georgia Tech football. The season ends 5-6. No chance for Georgia Tech to go to a bowl game, even though they may have wanted to with the way the other teams ended up winning 6-6. It's pretty sad whenever terrible Sun Belt teams get a chance to go, and Georgia Tech just did not get the chance to play that game against UCF. It's penalized. Of course, they could have lost that game and been 5-7.
Could have been 5-7, yeah.
But anyway, the bad season is now officially over. So what do the players do from here? We've already talked about the coaching situation. What do the players do?
Well, I mean, at this point, you got about 20 players that are graduating, and they're going to move on and go through. They're basically going to live life. So that'll be the first thing. But then with the other players, typically what happens is the coaching staff will start to sit down with them and evaluate and talk to them about their future and their plans and kind of map things out. It will not surprise me to see a transfer or two. That always happens. I don't think I can remember an off season where we didn't have one. So there are probably we'll probably see a little bit of that. Coaches will spend probably December and early January kind of sorting that out, and that'll position them for any potential transfers that do happen. Hopefully to be able to fill those slots on the recruiting trail. So, and we already know 2 players that have not exhausted eligibility are in fact graduated or have graduated and are not coming back next year. One of them we mentioned, Matthew Jordan at quarterback, and then the second one is Casey Wilson, who is a long snapper, which is a kind of an anonymous job. It's like the Maytag repairman.
Hey, those guys have commercials on TV all the time. So.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, until you have a long snapper that's not very good, you fail to appreciate how important it is. I can go back to the 2004 game against Clemson where Georgia Tech ended up getting the ball back because of a bad snap on a punt and winning the game. So from that standpoint, those two, they'll probably be looking at that. I know that 2 of those slots will be a defensive tackle and an offensive lineman. Troy Engel is one of the candidates there. Kadarian Hill. Ingle's the offensive lineman. Kadarian Hill's one they're looking at for defensive line. And then they're lining up some others. They've got a number of kids that came in. There was a kid out of South Georgia by the name of Graham that came in, and they're looking at some others as well. So a lot of players. We'll just kind of see, that are kind of shaping up for those last 2 spots. So,
if you're an average football player on the team, meaning you may not be the superstar on the team, but you get to play a good bit, what is the difference between fall semester and spring semester academically?
Usually they'll take a little heavier load in the spring semester. They'll take a little lighter. They'll try and kind of stack it with the easier classes, and then any of the harder classes they need to take, they'll push those out to spring.
Right.
So academically, I mean, you still have to be a full-time student. You still got to take the classes, but that's usually what they'll do.
Okay. Well, again, Georgia Tech is no easy cupcake school academically, and for people like Matthew Jordan to graduate on time and
early,
even better. And you can't fault him. He wants to move on.
And he has struggled with his ankle since he had that injury back in the spring during spring practice, and it bugged him then. And then he came in and had a little issue with it during some of the fall practice. Never really got back. And then that injury against Miami where he went out was a re-injure of that.
And Clemson, he came in briefly.
No, I guess it was Clemson.
Yeah.
It was Clemson where
he actually
had
good drive.
Yeah, actually, I take that back. It was Clemson where he went in, and he started that drive, and that's when he injured himself, pulled out. Taquan Marshall had to finish the drive. So
I knew something he didn't know.
Yeah,
that's pretty amazing.
You corrected me. Thank you very much. I need that sometimes because too many thoughts going through the head sometimes.
It's been a lerough year or so, even for Mr. Leifheit. Sometimes the old brain will maybe get a wire across backwards or something like that. I see you have your recruiting page at gojackets.com pulled up, and what is the latest scoop on that? And we encourage all of you to go to gojackets.com, join the club, be a part of gojackets.com, because recruiting now is extended. It's like Black Friday for shopping means the early shopping period. Well, it's early recruiting period for football.
Yes, so we're currently, as I mentioned, sitting at 16 recruits. We had 18 scholarships kind of headed into the year. Now we know that there's 2 more. That gives us a total of 20, so there's 4 slots to be filled. I already mentioned defensive tackle and offensive lineman and a couple candidates for those spots. We got 2 more, trying to work out exactly what those will be. I think they're kind of looking for possibly a quarterback, possibly a B-back, kind of looking at that. And then probably best athlete, trying to find the best available players they can get. If there are more that open up, that'll probably it'll probably depend on, who is it that decides they're going to transfer or leave or something like that, and then they'll probably kind of adjust accordingly. So that's where we're at. And signing day, keep in mind this year, early signing period, first time in football, December 20th. So those 16.
Is there a reason that day was chosen?
I have no idea. The NCAA, like the Lord, works in mysterious ways sometimes, and I have no idea why they picked
Well, I believe
in
the Lord. I don't believe in the NCAA.
I'm with you there. I am with you there.
Forgive me, Lord.
Yeah.
But how many of these, the numbers you just mentioned, how many do you expect to actually put pen to paper on December 20th?
Almost all of them. I
Really?
think there's 1 or 2 that may not. I think Wanye Thomas had mentioned his school was having a big ceremony, and he wanted to wait to sign with the rest of his classmates or with his teammates. He may be one. There might be another one. What does that mean? Well, I guess we'll see. But I would expect that most of them, very close to all of them, will sign in the early period, and we'll go from there.
All right. So this even though Paul Johnson was not a fan of this early signing period, it sounds like it may help him out.
I don't know if it helps him or not.
Okay.
So I mean, it's just tough to say. It's to me, it's 5 weeks roughly of babysitting that they don't have to do. Because
that's what it is. I'm laughing because I know what you're getting at.
Exactly. Because
you're the greatest. Hashtag whatever they have to tell all these kids.
Right, and you got people trying to scoop in at the last minute and whatnot, and it just gives less time to do that because the season is just now ending. And so instead of having 9 weeks to go out there and try and mess around with your opponents or cherry pick somebody or whatever, now you only got 3 or 4.
Remember, gojackets.com is the place you need to go to for all the information on signing, recruit commitments. Whenever anybody says anything recruiting, Jonathan and his Hound Dog team is all over it, and they're right there putting it out for everybody to see.
Yep, we publish a daily feature called Inside the Insider, which covers 2018 and 2019 recruiting. That also covers anything else going on, and also basketball recruiting as well. Occasionally we'll get some stuff on baseball and other sports, but by and large we focus heavily on football and basketball recruiting.
a CBS Sports interactive website, gojackets.com. They're on it like white on gold. We'll call timeout, come right back after this, talk some basketball, and get us out of here for the week. This is BuzzLine from CRM Sports. We'll be right back. John Rawl back with you here on BuzzLine, joined by Jonathan Leifheit of GoJackets.com, and we're at Buffalo's Cafe in Cumming. Buffalo's Cafe, where there is always a great beer selection with 14 drafts, including the local craft beers as a part of that mix. Buffalo's Cafe, your place to go watch your favorite team. Georgia Tech, it better be, but other professional teams that you may like watching this time of year. If you like basketball, NBA has a game, it seems like every moment of every day. So you can come here to Buffalo's Cafe and check it out with 14 Metro Atlanta locations. Buffalo's, where everyone is family. Right, Buzz? Yes, he agrees. We're going to talk some basketball now and get you out of here for the week as we've kind of gone through what has been a rough 2017. We'll be with you for a few more weeks before Christmas, so don't worry, we're not going anywhere. Maybe some more exciting football news will come our way in the coming weeks before we say adieu for 2017. Jonathan, basketball, what can you report on that?
It was a good week for basketball. 2-0 record on the week. So on, I believe it was Tuesday night, Georgia Tech took on Texas Rio Grande Valley. I'm sure you've all heard of that one before.
Yeah, I've heard of Texas and I've heard of the Rio Grande. I didn't know there was a school, but
there is. They defeated them 78-68, and then they took on the Mean Green of North Texas on that would have been Friday. And overcame kind of a sluggish first half, but managed to put them away 63-49. And then on top of that, Justin Moore, who is one of the point guards, served his 2-game suspension this week. So not only were they down, Tadrick Jackson and Josh Okogie, but they also added Justin Moore to that. Tadrick Jackson has served out his suspension, returned against North Texas, gave a little bit of more operating room for the interior. And Josh Okogie still has, I believe he has 2 more games left, but he's also fighting the injury, and Justin Moore will be back as well. So they're getting close to being back to full speed and on that in terms of that. Also, the early signing period has already occurred, and Georgia Tech signed all 3 of the guys that they were expecting to sign, and that would be
a buzz clap.
A buzz clap. There
yes.
You go. And that includes Michael DeVoe, who's a point guard out of Florida. He's been actually getting a lot of accolades lately. I think he's going to be a terrific addition. Khalid Moore out of Archbishop Malloy, who is for those who may remember that name, you go, it seems familiar. That's where Kenny Anderson played ball. So that's a place that's got some Georgia Tech history.
Weapon.
Huh?
Lethal Weapon.
Out of the Lethal Weapon, that would be him. And then the third player is Christian, and I never can say this right, but I believe it's Soland or Sajolan. I'm not exactly sure, but he's out of Katy, Texas. So those 3 have all signed. They should be great additions to the class as well. So a lot of basketball news as well. This coming week, they're playing Northwestern in the Big Ten Challenge.
Northwestern, which last year notched their first ever invitation to the big dance.
That's incredible to me that as long as they've been playing basketball, that's the first time they've ever gone to the NCAA.
A blind squirrel finds an acorn every now and then, but they had never found it until last year.
They had never found that. Apparently, there was not a lot of acorns in Evanston, Illinois.
And in fact, did they not win the Big Ten regular season or something? They had they not only made it, they had a great year. They even beat Vanderbilt in the big dance.
To be honest, I'm not up in my Northwestern basketball very much, so I'd have to.
Shame on you.
Yeah, I know.
Did you know this? And I can't 100% prove it because I've seen them play 1 or 2 night games. They are the last team in college football that does not have permanent lighting at their stadium.
I would believe that, but haven't they played a night game at Wrigley?
I think they must bring it. Well, that's not it. I've seen night games at Evanston, I think
Okay.
they must bring in trucks or something like that. I know
very possible.
Clemson used to do that back in the 80s because they didn't have permanent
Yeah,
lighting.
as a matter of fact, I remember playing a night game at Clemson. I think it was in '89 under temporary lighting back then when we were there.
So next time you're at a trivia contest, we've got you up to speed on the Northwestern Wildcats. So that game is going to be at McCamish against Northwestern, part of the Big Ten ACC Challenge.
That'll be Tuesday night at 7 p.m.
And another home game coming up soon against the Grambling State Tigers, and that will be on December 1st.
Which is Friday.
So basketball up and going, and that's where we need to focus more attention since that's the only sport currently.
And then Sunday, there will actually be a 6 p.m. We'll actually probably need to adjust our timing on our show a little bit so we can watch the game against Tennessee, and that will also be at McCamish.
All right, Tennessee coming to play the Jackets in football.
And that's going to be a really tough game.
Yeah, Tennessee, I saw them over the weekend.
Very good team.
Playing some tournament offshore, and it looked like they were doing pretty well. But Coach Barnes of Clemson fame is the coach there at Rocky Top after coming from Texas, where he had been there for a long time. So basketball up and going. Women's basketball, don't want to leave them out. I saw something about them recently.
They lost yesterday. Lost big time to Baylor, like 80-57. But otherwise, they've been doing pretty well. I think that was their first loss on the season.
Okay. So of course, GoJackets.com. They cover all that and more. And Jonathan, as we wrap up this week's show, anything else lanyap I need to cover for us here?
I think we've gone through the gamut of it all today. So I guess we're
okay. See you later. Bye.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else.
Anything positive from your tailgating?
We had a nice group. Had a friend that I haven't seen in a number of years show up and tailgated with us, so that was good to see her. And all in all, I think we had probably 25, 30 people there. Good group, and all in all, a lot of fun. So even though we lost the game, we always win the tailgate.
Yeah. Georgia Tech, a party school of America, no doubt about it. Jonathan Leifheit, GoJackets.com. Again, go to his website, check it out. CBS Sports Interactive is the parent company for GoJackets.com, and they have amazing information, especially with recruiting coming up big time. You will need to be on top of things so that when you get invited to Mr. Leifheit's tailgate at the RV, you'll impress him. And he is the guy with the website. How about that?
I always like to be impressed.
All right. Well, I impressed you earlier, so I get my one impression a year on this week's show. All right, Jonathan Leifheit, Mr. Leifheit, thank you. I'm John Rawl signing off from Buffalo's Cafe Coming. We'll be back again next week to talk all things Jackets, maybe some more recruiting information coming your way by next week's show. I want to thank all of you who've watched us on Facebook Live and all of you who've commented as well. We thank you for that. We'll see you back here next week, and maybe we'll have some really good information to pass along because this season has not been the greatest. We'll be real honest with you on that one. We're ready for a new season, but we'll have to wait several months for that, at least in terms of football. So, Mr. Leifheit.
Go Jackets.
Thank you very much.